Title: After my car accident, I spent 6 months in the hospital where my husband works, but he never visited. Chapter 1: The Obsession. Elena Harris had always been a woman driven by love. For 2 years, her entire world revolved around Nathan Hale, the man she had married despite his obvious disdain for her. She knew he didn't love her, but she believed she could change that over time. Her unwavering dedication became her strength and, ironically, her greatest weakness. Nathan was everything she wasn't: successful, composed, and admired by everyone around him. Yet, his coldness toward her was undeniable. Every interaction felt like walking on eggshells, as though one wrong step would shatter the fragile remnants of their relationship. But Elena endured it, blinded by her own desperate hope. The ghost of Amelia, Nathan's ex-fiancée, lingered in their lives. Friends, colleagues, and even Nathan's family viewed Elena as the villain who had replaced someone they considered perfect. The whispered accusations of how she had ruined Nathan's happiness were relentless. She swallowed the bitterness, convincing herself that love required sacrifice. But cracks in her resilience started to show. The loneliness she felt in her marriage was overwhelming, and no amount of effort seemed to thaw Nathan's icy demeanor. He was there physically but emotionally absent, a shadow of the man she once thought he could be. One stormy evening, rushing home to prepare for Nathan, her car lost control on the wet roads. The crash was violent and sudden, shattering her body and forcing her into the darkest chapter of her life. Chapter 2: The Hospital. Elena woke up to pain so excruciating that it left her breathless. Her legs were in casts, her ribs bruised, and her arms immobilized. She learned she had suffered multiple fractures and would require extensive rehabilitation. But the most painful realization came when she asked the nurse if Nathan had visited. "Dr. Hale?" The nurse's expression faltered before she quickly masked it. "No, I haven't seen him around." Those words, delivered with a mix of pity and judgment, echoed in Elena's mind. She couldn't believe it. Nathan worked in the same hospital. How could he not care enough to check on her? Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Nathan's absence was a constant reminder of how little she meant to him. She overheard nurses whispering in the corridors, pitying her but also excusing Nathan's behavior. "He's probably relieved," one of them had said. She was such a burden to him. Elena's initial shock turned into numb acceptance. The man she loved had abandoned her in every possible way. For the first time, she began to see her life, and her marriage, for what it truly was. The realization was brutal but necessary. Despite the emotional devastation, Elena resolved to use her recovery time to rebuild herself. She couldn't move her body yet, but she could reclaim her mind. Little by little, she began to let go of the fantasy she had built around Nathan. Chapter 3: The Goodbye. The day Elena was discharged, she felt like a prisoner walking out of a cell, not because of the hospital, but because of the emotional chains she was finally breaking. Her body was still weak, but her mind was clear. For the first time in years, she wasn't going to fight for Nathan. Instead of heading home, she went straight to his office. Nathan barely looked up when she entered. "What do you need, Elena?" he asked, his voice devoid of warmth or concern. His indifference no longer stung the way it once did. She placed a folder on his desk. "I wanted to give you this." He glanced at it, his brow furrowing in confusion. "What is it?" "Divorce papers," she said, her voice steady. "You're free now, Nathan. I don't want the house, the car, or anything else. All I want is to move on with my life." For a moment, Nathan's composure faltered. But before he could respond, Elena turned and walked out of the room. Each step felt like shedding a layer of the pain she had carried for so long. Chapter 4: The Silence. Nathan stared at the divorce papers, unable to process what had just happened. For 2 years, Elena had been a constant presence in his life, a presence he had resented, yes, but also one he had taken for granted. Now, she was gone, leaving behind nothing but silence. The first few days after her departure felt like a reprieve. He could finally focus on his work without her hovering around him. But as the days turned into weeks, an unfamiliar emptiness crept into his life. His apartment, once filled with her laughter and the faint aroma of her cooking, felt cold and lifeless. At work, he caught himself checking the time, expecting one of her texts or calls. He had always complained about her neediness, but now, the absence of her messages left an unsettling void. He didn't want to admit it, but he missed her. Nathan's friends noticed the change in him. "You should be relieved," one of them joked. "Isn't this what you wanted?" But the words didn't bring him comfort. Instead, they made him question whether he had been wrong all along. For the first time in years, Nathan began to reflect on his own actions. He had pushed Elena away, but now he wondered if he had also pushed away something far more valuable than he'd realized. Chapter 5: The Transformation. 6 months later, Elena walked into a charity gala, her posture confident, her smile radiant. She was no longer the woman who had once clung to Nathan's every word. Her time away had transformed her into someone stronger, someone who knew her worth. Nathan was at the gala too, though he hadn't planned on attending. When he saw Elena across the room, his breath caught in his throat. She looked stunning, her laughter lighting up the space around her. She seemed happy. "Elena," he said, approaching her cautiously. She turned, her expression polite but distant. "Nathan," she replied, her tone cordial but lacking the warmth he had once taken for granted. "You look incredible," he said, unsure of what else to say. Her smile didn't falter, but she didn't linger on his compliment. "Thank you. I hope you're doing well." As she walked away, Nathan felt a pang of regret so sharp it was almost physical. For the first time, he realized he had lost something irreplaceable. But the question that haunted him now was whether he had any chance of winning her back. Chapter 6: The Realization. Nathan couldn't shake the image of Elena from his mind. She had always been beautiful, but now there was an aura about her that he had never noticed before. She was radiant, confident, and completely out of his reach. For the first time, Nathan realized what he had lost. He spent the next few days in turmoil, replaying their past in his mind. The countless times he had dismissed her efforts, the cold indifference he had shown, and the way he had pushed her away, all of it came rushing back like a tidal wave of guilt. Nathan's colleagues began to notice his distracted demeanor. He wasn't the composed doctor they knew. His work was meticulous, but his heart wasn't in it. "You okay, Nathan?" a nurse asked one evening. He forced a smile, but his silence spoke volumes. He began to hear whispers about Elena's new life. She had started working with a foundation that helped accident survivors rebuild their lives, becoming a beacon of hope for others. Nathan couldn't help but admire her resilience. One evening, sitting alone in his apartment, he picked up the divorce papers she had left behind. Her graceful signature on the dotted line felt like a final goodbye. It hit him then, he hadn't just lost his wife. He had lost the only person who had ever truly loved him. Chapter 7: Reaching Out. Nathan knew he couldn't let things end like this. He had to find a way to see Elena again, even if it meant facing the possibility of rejection. He reached out to mutual acquaintances, subtly asking about her without revealing his intentions. "She's doing well," one of them said. "Really turned her life around." "She's happy, Nathan." The words stung. Happy? Without him? He had always believed she couldn't live without him, but now, it seemed like the opposite was true. Finally, he learned that she would be attending another event for her foundation. He decided to go, convincing himself it was for charity, though deep down, he knew the truth, he needed to see her. When he arrived at the event, Nathan felt out of place. The room buzzed with energy, and at the center of it all was Elena, effortlessly commanding attention. She wore a navy blue dress that accentuated her elegance, her smile captivating everyone around her. He hesitated, his confidence faltering. Would she even want to talk to him? Gathering his courage, he approached her. "Elena," he said softly. She turned, her expression briefly registering surprise before settling into polite neutrality. "Nathan," she said with a nod. Chapter 8: A Difficult Conversation. Nathan struggled to find the right words as they sat at a quiet corner table. Elena seemed calm, but there was an unmistakable wall between them. You look amazing, he said, his voice tinged with regret. Thank you, she replied simply, her tone devoid of emotion. Nathan felt a pang of frustration. This wasn't the Elena he remembered, the one who had always looked at him with unbridled devotion. But he realized that this change was his doing. I came here because I wanted to apologize, he began. For everything. For how I treated you, for not being there when you needed me. Elena raised an eyebrow, her gaze steady. What exactly are you sorry for, Nathan? That you didn't visit me in the hospital? Or that you ignored me for 2 years? Her words were sharp but not cruel. They cut through him like a scalpel, forcing him to confront the depth of his mistakes. For all of it, he said honestly. I was blind, selfish. I didn't see how much you gave me, and how much I took you for granted. Elena sighed softly, her expression softening just a fraction. Nathan, I don't hate you. But I've moved on. I had to, for my own sanity. And I hope you find a way to do the same. Chapter 9, The Struggle. Nathan couldn't let go of Elena's words. She had forgiven him, but it was clear she no longer wanted him in her life. For days, he wrestled with the idea of giving up. Maybe this was what he deserved, to lose her forever. But the thought of never seeing her again was unbearable. He began to attend every event where he knew she'd be, always keeping a respectful distance but hoping for a chance to talk to her again. Elena noticed his presence but didn't acknowledge it. She was too busy with her work, her newfound purpose giving her life a richness she had never experienced before. But deep down, a part of her wondered if Nathan's persistence was genuine. One evening, after a particularly successful fundraiser, Nathan finally found her alone. Elena, please, he said, his voice raw with emotion. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I'm begging you to let me prove that I've changed. Elena studied him for a long moment. Nathan, change isn't about words. It's about actions. And right now, I'm not sure I'm ready to believe you. Her honesty was like a dagger to his heart, but he knew she was right. Chapter 10, Proving His Worth. Determined to win back Elena's trust, Nathan began volunteering at her foundation. At first, she was skeptical of his motives, but as the weeks went by, she saw a different side of him, humble, patient, and genuinely committed to helping others. He spent hours listening to accident survivors, offering medical advice and emotional support. His once arrogant demeanor softened, replaced by a quiet determination to make a difference. For the first time, Elena saw glimpses of the man she had always hoped he could be. Their interactions remained professional, but there were moments of genuine connection, like when Nathan stayed late to help her organize an event or when he comforted a child who was afraid of surgery. These moments chipped away at the wall Elena had built around her heart. One evening, as they packed up after a long day, Nathan turned to her. Thank you for letting me be part of this, he said earnestly. It's taught me so much about what really matters. Elena nodded, her guard still up but her resolve starting to waver. It's not about me, Nathan. It's about the people we're helping. That's what matters. But even as she said the words, she couldn't ignore the flicker of hope that stirred within her. Chapter 11, A Glimmer of Hope. As the days turned into weeks, Elena found it increasingly difficult to ignore Nathan's presence in her life. He wasn't just showing up, he was making a difference. The foundation flourished under his contributions, and his interactions with survivors and volunteers were heartfelt and sincere. Elena often caught herself watching him from afar. This was a side of Nathan she had never seen before. Was it possible that he had truly changed? She wanted to believe it, but her heart hesitated. Trust, once broken, was not easy to rebuild. One evening, after a successful event, the team decided to celebrate at a nearby cafe. Nathan sat at the edge of the group, listening intently to everyone's stories but keeping a respectful distance from Elena. She found herself stealing glances at him, and when their eyes met, she quickly looked away. Later, as they walked out of the cafe, Nathan approached her. Can I walk you to your car? He asked. For a moment, Elena considered declining, but something in his tone stopped her. She nodded silently, and they strolled down the quiet street together. I know I have a lot to make up for, Nathan said softly, breaking the silence. And I don't expect you to forgive me easily. But I'm not giving up, Elena. You're worth fighting for. His words lingered in the air, leaving Elena conflicted. Chapter 12, Old Wounds. Despite Nathan's efforts, Elena couldn't help but be reminded of the pain he had caused. One afternoon, while organizing a support session for survivors, she came across an old photo of them together. It was taken during their first year of marriage, a time when she had been hopelessly in love and unaware of the storm brewing in their relationship. The memories came flooding back, the nights she spent waiting for him, the cold way he dismissed her, and the hollow feeling of being unwanted. She felt a sharp pang in her chest, a reminder of why she had walked away. That evening, Nathan arrived early at the foundation. He found Elena staring at the photo, her expression unreadable. That was a long time ago, he said gently, his voice breaking her reverie. It was, she replied, her tone cool. And yet, it still feels like yesterday. She placed the photo down and turned to face him. Nathan, you can't erase the past. What's done is done. I know, he said, his eyes filled with regret. But I'm trying to build a future, one that's different, one where I do things right. I don't expect you to forget, but I hope you'll let me show you I've learned from my mistakes. Chapter 13, Breaking Down Walls. Elena couldn't ignore the sincerity in Nathan's actions. Day by day, he chipped away at the walls she had built around her heart. But she wasn't ready to let him in completely, not yet. One weekend, the foundation organized a community outreach event at a nearby park. Nathan was assigned to manage logistics, a task he approached with surprising enthusiasm. Elena watched as he interacted with the volunteers, his genuine kindness drawing smiles from everyone around him. During a break, Nathan joined Elena under a shaded tree. You've done an incredible job here, he said, handing her a bottle of water. She accepted it with a nod, her guard still up. Thank you, she replied. This foundation means everything to me. It's given me purpose. She hesitated before adding, something I didn't have for a long time. Nathan's expression softened. I'm glad you found it, Elena. And I'm grateful you've let me be part of it. For the first time in months, Elena allowed herself to smile at him, a small but significant step toward reconciliation. Chapter 14, A Shared Moment. One evening, as they worked late at the foundation office, a sudden power outage plunged the room into darkness. Elena fumbled for her phone, but Nathan was quicker. He turned on a small flashlight from his pocket. Prepared for everything, aren't you? Elena remarked, her tone light for the first time in what felt like forever. Nathan chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. They found themselves sitting by the window, the city lights casting a soft glow. For the first time in months, their conversation drifted to lighter topics, their shared memories, their favorite places, and the dreams they had once discussed. I used to think we'd travel the world together, Nathan said wistfully. You always talked about wanting to see Paris. Elena looked at him, surprised by the admission. I didn't think you remembered that. I remember everything, Elena, he said, his voice filled with regret. I just didn't realize how much it all meant until it was too late. The vulnerability in his tone caught her off guard, and for a brief moment, she saw the man she had fallen in love with. Chapter 15, A New Beginning? Nathan's continued efforts began to wear down Elena's resistance. She couldn't deny that he had changed, but her heart still wavered. Was it worth risking everything to trust him again? One afternoon, while reviewing plans for a new project, Nathan surprised her with a gesture that left her speechless. He had secured funding for the foundation's expansion, a move that would allow them to help even more people. I didn't do this to impress you, he said, anticipating her reaction. I did it because I believe in what you've built here. And because I want to support you in every way I can. Elena felt tears well up in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. Thank you, Nathan, she said quietly. This means a lot. For the first time, she saw the depth of his commitment, not just to her but to becoming a better person. That evening, as she stood on the foundation's rooftop, watching the sunset, Nathan joined her. Whatever happens, Elena, I want you to know I'll always be here for you, he said. She turned to him, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. I'll think about it, Nathan. But you need to be patient. Chapter 16, The Unexpected Visitor. Just as Nathan's sincerity began to chip away at Elena's walls, an unexpected figure from the past resurfaced, Sarah, Nathan's former friend who had often defended his actions. One day, she showed up at the foundation unannounced, her presence instantly darkening Elena's mood. Elena, Sarah greeted with a forced smile. It's been a while. Elena stiffened but maintained her composure. It has. What brings you here? I heard about the great work you're doing here and thought I'd contribute. Nathan told me all about it, Sarah said, her tone dripping with familiarity. Elena's stomach churned. She wasn't sure why Sarah's presence bothered her so much, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it spelled trouble. After Sarah left, Elena confronted Nathan. Why is she here? What is she trying to prove? Nathan looked genuinely confused. She wanted to donate, and I thought it could help the foundation. I didn't think it would upset you. Chapter 17, Doubts Resurface. Sarah's involvement quickly proved to be more than just a simple donation. She began attending events, offering suggestions, and embedding herself in the foundation's operations. While her contributions were helpful, her constant presence unsettled Elena. During a meeting, Sarah spoke over Elena repeatedly, suggesting changes to a key project. Nathan, oblivious to the tension, sided with Sarah, which only fueled Elena's frustrations. After the meeting, Elena pulled Nathan aside. You need to rein her in, she said firmly. This is my foundation, not hers. Nathan frowned. She's only trying to help, Elena. Maybe you're reading too much into it. Elena's heart sank. His words echoed the dismissive tone he had once used during their marriage. You're doing it again, Nathan, she said quietly. Taking her side over mine. The conversation ended in silence, but the seeds of doubt were firmly planted in Elena's mind. Was Nathan truly changing, or was she walking back into a situation where she would always come second? Chapter 18, An Act of Sabotage. Things took a darker turn when Elena discovered that an important proposal had been altered before submission. The changes undermined her vision for the foundation, and upon investigation, she realized Sarah had made the edits without consulting anyone. Elena confronted Sarah in front of the team, her anger barely contained. You had no right to change my proposal, she said, her voice cold and steady. Sarah shrugged, unbothered. I thought it needed improvement. I was just trying to help. That's not your call to make, Elena shot back. If you can't respect the work we do here, then maybe you shouldn't be involved. Nathan walked in during the confrontation, and Sarah quickly played the victim. I was only trying to help, and now I'm being attacked, she said, tears welling up. Nathan hesitated, caught between the two women, but his momentary silence spoke volumes to Elena. Later, Nathan tried to explain, but Elena cut him off. If you can't see how toxic her presence is, then maybe you haven't changed as much as I thought. Chapter 19, Walking Away Again. The tension between Elena and Nathan reached a breaking point. Elena began questioning whether her progress and peace were worth jeopardizing by letting Nathan back into her life. One evening, after an exhausting day at the foundation, she made a decision. Nathan, she said, finding him in the break room. This isn't working. You've done good things here, but your inability to see Sarah for who she really is, it's too much for me to handle. Nathan's face fell. Elena, please don't do this. I'm trying, I really am. I know you are, she replied, her voice softer now. But sometimes, trying isn't enough. I can't go through this again, not with her here, not with the doubts creeping back in. She left the foundation that night, handing over temporary leadership to another trusted volunteer. Nathan watched her go, the weight of his failures pressing heavily on his shoulders. Chapter 20, A Crossroads. In the weeks that followed, Elena threw herself into personal growth and self-reflection. She attended therapy, reconnected with old friends, and started painting again, something she hadn't done in years. Each day, she felt a little stronger, a little more herself. Meanwhile, Nathan struggled with his own demons. He finally confronted Sarah, realizing too late the damage her presence had caused. "You need to leave," he told her firmly. "You've overstayed your welcome." Sarah didn't take it well, but Nathan didn't waver. Determined to make amends, Nathan took a step back from the foundation, giving Elena the space she needed. He wrote her a letter, pouring out his thoughts and regrets, but he didn't send it. He wanted his actions, not his words, to show her he was changing. One day, Elena visited the foundation to check on its progress. She was surprised to find everything running smoothly, and to hear from the team that Nathan had stepped down to avoid any further complications. As she stood in the office, looking at the space they had built together, Elena felt a mix of emotions. She wasn't sure if she was ready to forgive Nathan, but she couldn't deny the steps he had taken to prove himself. Chapter 21, A Letter Unread. Elena found the letter Nathan had written to her, tucked into a file of project updates at the foundation. At first, she considered ignoring it, hesitant to reopen wounds that were just beginning to heal. But curiosity got the better of her. The letter was heartfelt, each word dripping with raw emotion. Nathan wrote about his regrets, his misguided choices, and his desire to change, not for her, but because losing her had shown him the person he didn't want to be. Yet Elena folded the letter before finishing it. Words weren't enough, not anymore. She needed to see proof, not promises. As much as his honesty moved her, she reminded herself that their history was filled with moments where actions never matched intentions. That evening, she placed the letter in her desk drawer, unresolved feelings swirling in her mind. She wasn't ready to forgive, but she wasn't ready to let go completely either. Chapter 22, An Unlikely Ally. As Elena struggled with her emotions, an unexpected ally emerged, Emily. The woman whose name had haunted her marriage appeared at the foundation one afternoon, requesting a meeting. "Before you send me away, just hear me out," Emily said, her voice calm yet firm. Elena crossed her arms, wary. "You've got 5 minutes." Emily explained that she had cut ties with Nathan years ago after realizing how toxic their dynamic was. "I didn't come here to stir up old wounds," she said. "I came because I see what you've built, and I want to help." Elena was skeptical but curious. Emily's insights into Nathan's past behavior shed light on why he had acted the way he did. "He was broken long before you married him," Emily admitted. "But I think losing you forced him to confront that." While it didn't absolve Nathan's actions, the conversation gave Elena a new perspective. She began to wonder if there was a chance for redemption, not just for Nathan but for herself as well. Chapter 23, A Betrayal Within the Foundation. Just as Elena began to find her footing again, she discovered that funds were missing from the foundation's account. Panic set in as she realized the embezzlement threatened their biggest project yet, a shelter for women recovering from trauma. Elena assembled her team, demanding answers. Suspicion quickly fell on Sarah, who had left abruptly after her fallout with Nathan. But without evidence, the foundation's reputation and future hung in the balance. Nathan, hearing about the crisis, reached out to Elena. "Let me help," he offered. "I know you don't trust me completely, but I can use my resources to track this down." Despite her reservations, Elena agreed. They worked side by side, following paper trails and confronting potential leads. The time spent together forced them to confront lingering feelings and unspoken truths. As the investigation progressed, they uncovered not just financial theft but a conspiracy involving a former board member. The betrayal cut deep, but the crisis brought Nathan and Elena closer, reigniting the connection they thought was lost. Chapter 24, Facing the Scars. The resolution of the embezzlement scandal gave the foundation a fresh start, but it left Elena emotionally drained. She decided to take a brief hiatus, retreating to a cabin she had visited in her childhood. Nathan surprised her by showing up uninvited. "I know you need space," he said, standing on the porch. "But I had to see you." Elena considered sending him away but decided against it. For the first time, they spoke openly about their shared pain. Nathan admitted to the insecurities that had driven his cruelty, while Elena confessed how deeply she had lost herself in trying to win his love. I don't expect you to forgive me, Nathan said, his voice breaking. But I want you to know that everything I've done since you left has been for you, for the hope that I could become someone worthy of your forgiveness. Elena didn't respond immediately. Instead, she invited him inside, unsure of what the future held but willing to explore it, step by cautious step. Chapter 25, The New Beginning. Months passed, and while their relationship remained undefined, Nathan and Elena found a rhythm of collaboration and mutual respect. Together, they expanded the foundation's reach, launching programs that made a tangible impact on the community. One evening, during a charity gala, Nathan took the stage to deliver a speech. His words weren't about himself but about Elena. This foundation exists because of one woman's vision, resilience, and heart. Elena taught me what it means to truly care, and I owe her everything. Elena, sitting in the audience, felt tears prick her eyes. For the first time, Nathan's actions felt genuine, free of the performative gestures that once defined him. After the event, Nathan approached her. I don't want to rush you, he said. But if there's ever a chance for us to try again, I'm ready to wait. Elena smiled softly. We'll see, Nathan. For now, let's keep building something good together. Chapter 26, A Slow Thaw. Elena began to notice the changes in Nathan, not just in his actions but in the small, quiet ways he interacted with her. He no longer sought to dominate conversations or make grand gestures to prove himself. Instead, he listened, showed patience, and respected her boundaries. During one of their late-night meetings at the foundation, Nathan brought her tea, just the way she liked it. I remembered, he said with a small smile. She hesitated but accepted the cup, their hands brushing for the briefest moment. These moments became more frequent, sharing quiet dinners after long workdays, exchanging meaningful glances during meetings, and working side by side on projects. While Elena didn't openly acknowledge it, she felt her walls beginning to crumble. One evening, after a particularly successful fundraiser, they found themselves walking through the city streets. Nathan stopped suddenly and said, "Thank you for letting me back into your life, even if just as a colleague." Elena looked at him, the vulnerability in his eyes catching her off guard. "You're earning it," she replied simply. Chapter 27, Unspoken Confessions. Despite their growing closeness, Elena remained cautious. Memories of his neglect and cruelty lingered, keeping her from fully opening up. Nathan sensed this and didn't push her, but his longing for her forgiveness was evident in every action. During a visit to a shelter the foundation had funded, they spoke with women who had endured unimaginable hardships. As they listened to the survivors' stories of resilience, Nathan turned to Elena. "You inspire them, you know. You've inspired me too." The sincerity in his voice caught Elena off guard. She realized she had been so focused on protecting herself that she hadn't truly seen the depth of his transformation. Later that evening, as they walked back to the car, Nathan broke the silence. "I never stopped loving you, Elena. I just didn't know how to show it. I don't expect you to say anything, but I needed you to know." Elena felt her heart tighten. She wanted to believe him but was terrified of being hurt again. Instead of responding, she simply nodded, her silence leaving the door slightly ajar. Chapter 28, The Letter Revisited. Back at home, Elena found herself thinking about the letter Nathan had written months ago. She retrieved it from the drawer and read it in its entirety for the first time. Nathan had poured his soul into the letter, admitting every flaw, every moment he had failed her. He wrote about his regrets, his shame, and how her absence had made him confront the man he had become. "You deserved so much better, and I hate myself for not giving it to you," one line read. Tears blurred her vision as she finished reading. For the first time, she saw Nathan's pain alongside her own. His words resonated deeply, chipping away at the bitterness she had clung to for so long. Elena folded the letter and sat quietly for hours, replaying their shared history in her mind. She wasn't ready to forgive completely, but she realized she was ready to try. Chapter 29, A Step Toward Forgiveness. The next day, Elena invited Nathan for coffee. He arrived promptly, his expression hopeful yet cautious. They talked about everything but their relationship, work, the foundation, even the weather. Finally, Elena broke the tension. "I read your letter," she said, her voice steady. Nathan froze, his eyes searching hers for a reaction. It was honest. Painfully so. "I meant every word," he replied. "And I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to you if you let me." Elena nodded, her expression softening. "I'm not ready to dive back in, Nathan. But I'm willing to take small steps, together." Nathan's relief was palpable. "That's all I've ever wanted. I'll take whatever you're willing to give." Chapter 30, A New Beginning. Months later, their relationship had transformed into something new. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. They laughed more, talked openly, and worked together as equals. Nathan made it clear through his actions that he was committed to her, not just as a partner but as someone who truly valued her. He attended therapy, continued his work at the hospital, and supported Elena's initiatives at the foundation. One evening, as they stood on the balcony of her apartment, Nathan turned to her. "I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I'm grateful you gave me one." Elena leaned against the railing, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "People change, Nathan. I see that now. And maybe we deserve a second chance too." As the cool night breeze swirled around them, Nathan reached for her hand, and this time, she didn't pull away. It wasn't a grand reconciliation but a quiet promise of something better, a new beginning built on trust, respect, and love. Epilogue, Love Rewritten. 3 years later, Elena stood in the garden of their new home, watching as the morning sunlight filtered through the trees. The house was a modest but warm retreat just outside the city, a place they had chosen together. She smiled as she heard Nathan's laughter from inside. He was sitting at the kitchen table, helping their 3-year-old son, Leo, stack blocks into a precarious tower. The sound of their voices filled the air with a happiness she had once thought unattainable. Elena's journey to this moment had been anything but simple. Forgiveness wasn't a single act, it was a daily decision. She and Nathan had taken their time rebuilding what had been broken. Therapy, open communication, and shared goals became the foundation of their new life together. Nathan had proven his love not through grand gestures but through consistency. He had been by her side through every challenge, supporting her career, sharing responsibilities, and putting their family first. Over time, Elena found herself trusting him again, slowly, then completely. As Nathan stepped outside with Leo on his shoulders, he looked at Elena with the same reverence he had shown her in those first tentative months of reconciliation. "Hey," he said softly, setting Leo down so he could run toward her. "We're thinking pancakes for breakfast. What do you think?" Elena knelt to scoop Leo into her arms, laughing as he babbled about syrup and blueberries. When she stood, Nathan was there, his arms circling them both in a quiet embrace. Looking up at him, Elena smiled, her heart full. "I think pancakes sound perfect." In that moment, surrounded by the family they had created, Elena realized their love story wasn't about erasing the past. It was about rewriting it, together.